It's not a contest, so I don't mean to brag, but it's only our leader whose name is on a flag. One final thought, though, Mr. Speaker. One final thought, though. Canada ain't broke, though I will admit we may be a bit woke. Mr. Speaker, colleagues, Merry Christmas and Happy Holidays, too. May we all get a Christmas card from a Randy or two.
This guy's garage. Like and subscribe.
Oral questions. Questions orales. L'honorable.
The Honourable Leader of the Official Opposition.
L'honorable chef de l'opposition.
The Prime Yet he clings to power. He's lost control of immigration, lost control of the borders, lost control of spending, deficits, inflation, housing costs. In fact, his former, apparently, finance minister was trying to get spending under control by capping the deficit at an already crazy $40 billion. But he took carbon tax Carney's advice and pushed her beyond that guardrail and was trying to throw her off the cliff. She's now resigned minutes before presenting her fall economic update. This cannot go on. When will we have a carbon tax elected?
Honourable Leader of the Government in the House of Commons.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. Mr. Speaker, our government looks forward to presenting the fall economic statement later this afternoon. But I would also like to take this opportunity to extend my gratitude for all that the member from University Rosedale has accomplished for this country and will continue to do for this country. She has played an integral role in this government. First of all, standing up for Canada and defending NAFTA, bringing forward universal childcare, and the incredible work that she has done in defending Ukraine. We are very grateful for all that she's contributed to this government and to Canada. Thank you, Mr. Speaker.
The Honourable Leader of the Opposition.
For the Finance Minister. Who are you?
The Honourable Leader of the Government in the House of Commons.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. Mr. Speaker, at a time when Canadians are struggling, we are happy to bring forward measures that are going to assist them. Things like the GST tax cut that took place starting this past Saturday, going until February 15th. And while the Conservative leader and the members of his caucus stay focused on us, we're going to stay focused on helping.
The Honourable Leader of the Opposition.
Mr. Speaker, it was a serious question. Who is the Finance Minister? After the Finance Minister's resignation this morning, automatically the Industry Minister became Minister of Finance. And congratulations. But he immediately quit. After him, in the line of precedence, it was the two Randys. Well, they don't want it. So now we don't have a finance minister just a couple of minutes before the fall economic statement will be presented. So where's the minister?
The Honourable Leader of the Government,
The Honourable Leader of the Government in the House of Commons. Thank you, Mr. Speaker. As I said, our government is looking forward to presenting the fall economic statement later this afternoon. There are important measures in that update, measures that are important for Canadians. It's time for the Leader of the Conservatives to recognize that while he's focused on us, we are focused on Canadians.
The Honourable Leader of the Opposition.
Mr. Speaker, just to underline the chaos we're faced with here, the Finance Minister resigned the day she was to present the fall budget, which was going to contain a massive deficit overrun. The job then went automatically to the Industry Minister, who immediately resigned, like on the spot, which then went down the line, and the next person in order was the famous two Randys. And they're not available to do the job either. We're now less than 2 hours away from the fall economic update. Why won't the Prime Minister have the courage to come in here, present it himself, and put it for a confidence vote tonight?
I would like to remind all members, as I did during statements today, for members to be careful not to refer to other sitting members by their names, but to use their titles or to use their writing names. The Honourable Leader of the Government in the House of Commons.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. Well, Mr. Speaker, while the Leader of the Opposition continues to play politics in this place, we look forward to presenting the fall economic statement later this afternoon that will have a series of important measures for Canadians. Things that are going to help them with the affordability challenges, that are going to put Canada, Canadian jobs, and the Canadian economy first. Thank you, Mr. Speaker.
I would like to ask the honourable member from St. Albert, Edmonton, to please not take the floor when he is not recognized by the Speaker.
The Honourable Member for La Prairie. We already knew that between 20 and 40 Liberal MPs no longer had confidence in the Prime Minister. We also knew that 8 ministers would be jumping ship. Today, the Minister of Finance decided to step down instead of presenting the fall economic statement. She wrote, black and white, that she disagrees with the Prime Minister on the best path forward for Canada. So she has also taken away her confidence in the Prime Minister. We are watching this government, this Liberal government, fall apart, and it's pretty ugly to see. Will the Prime Minister call an election? The Honourable Government House Leader. Thank you, Mr. Speaker, and I would like to thank my colleague for his question. As I mentioned, as a government, we are looking forward to presenting the fall economic statement later this afternoon. There are important measures in there for Canadians when it comes to affordability in particular, and we are exclusively focused on Canadians, and we will continue to protect Canadian economy and Canadian jobs.
The Honourable Member from Burnaby South.
People can't afford their groceries. People can't find a home to call their own. And the Conservatives are
Order!
Just another reference.
The Honourable Member from Burnaby South from the top, please.
Canadians literally cannot afford the groceries they need. They can't afford to find a home to call their own. And now Trump, buddies of the Conservatives, MAGA Conservatives love this guy, Trump is threatening hundreds of thousands of jobs in Canada. And the Prime Minister is more focused on himself, on infighting. The Prime Minister cannot remain in that position. Will he resign?
The Honourable Minister for Innovation.
Mr. Speaker, this is not the time for slogan. This is not the time for partisanship. This is not a time to make jokes, Mr. Speaker. This is about rallying for Canadians. This is a time where Canadians need to know that this House and all the members are standing behind them, that we're going to invest in Canadians, that we're going to invest in this country, that we're going to invest in our workers, and that we're going to invest in our industry, Mr. Speaker, and that we're going to prepare Canada to be the best prepared to be able to deal with our U.S. friends. Mr. Speaker, this is the time where we show that we're all Canadians.
The Honourable Leader of the Opposition.
Mr. Speaker, the NDP leader is absolutely right. This cannot continue. This Prime Minister cannot go on like this. Housing costs have doubled. Food bank use has doubled. The debt has doubled. Gun crime has doubled. And now we face troubling tariff threats from a president who can see weakness coming from a mile away. The Prime Minister must leave this job. But there's only one person who can remove him. and that's the leader of the NDP.
Yes.
Will he put the country ahead of his pension and vote for a carbon tax election now?
Eric? So, although the preamble to that question dealt with the administration of government, the question itself did not, and the chair has made it clear that we're not doing that. The honourable member from Thornhill.
Prime Minister has lost control. The Prime Minister's own deputy quit just hours before her economic statement, all of a sudden saying, Canadians know when we're focused on ourselves, and describing a newfound disdain for costly political gimmicks. Those are her quotes. Right. This after her own political rival, Mark Carney, wrote the fall economic statement full of things that she didn't want to present. The old boys club isn't in charge. Canadians are. Right. And it's time for credible leadership in the seriousness of this moment, not the fake feminism of this phony Prime Minister. It's time for Canadians to decide. So will anyone or everyone over there finally agree?
Yeah. The Honourable Leader of the Government in the House of Commons.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. As I mentioned earlier, we are looking forward today to presenting the fall economic statement that is going to have a series of important measures for Canadians. At a time like this, it is important that all of us band together, united as Canadians, to make sure that we're doing everything we can to protect the Canadian economy, protect Canadian jobs, and to stand up for Canada. Thank you, Mr. Speaker.
The honourable member for Thornhill.
Mr. Speaker, they can't even stand by each other. Hours before delivering the fiscal update, the Finance Minister resigned. She lost confidence in the Prime Minister. Last night, the failed Housing Minister and the worst Immigration Minister in the history of this country also resigned. A couple of Randys, and now they're up to 9 ministers that need to be replaced. He's lost control of the government. The party of backroom boys is over. The backbench should look up from their laptops, and the NDP leader shouldn't be the only one in this House with confidence in the Prime Minister. Present the statement and call a vote today.
Hear, hear.
Again, I'm just going to, for the last time, order. I'm going to ask members once again to remind themselves not to refer to members by their first names. The Honourable Minister for Housing, Infrastructure and Communities.
Now, Mr. Speaker, I'm not sure who she's talking about, but I'm still here for now. I can guarantee you, Mr. Speaker, that there are two kinds of people who run for office in politics. There are people who want to do something, and there are people who want to be somebody. And I can tell you, on our side of the House, we want to do things. We want to build the houses to make sure families can afford to keep a roof over their heads. We want to make sure families can afford to keep their food on the table to feed their kids. We want to make sure people can find a job to go to that gives them a sense of pride and allows them to contribute to their communities. On the Conservative side, their guy has been writing essays about why he should be Prime Minister since he was a teenager.
The Honourable Member for Calgary Nose Hill.
On Friday, the Prime Minister told Canada's first female finance minister but she was fired, but to keep sweet and present their wildly overspent budget on Monday so that he and an unelected man, Mark Carbon Tax Carney, wouldn't have to take the blame for their broken budget. He then, unbothered, released a video of him making cinnamon buns to get the women folks vote. How can any woman in that caucus defend that man instead of calling for an election now?
Hear, hear. The order. The Honourable Leader of the Government in the House of Commons.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. I didn't realize cinnamon buns were a gendered food, but what I would say is that her question says more about how that member and Conservative members view women in this country than anything else. Thank you, Mr. Speaker.
The Honourable Member for Calgary Nose Hill.
are facing violence in the streets. They can't afford groceries. They can't afford to buy presents for their kids for the holidays. They can't afford anything. Canadian women are far worse off under this fake feminist Prime Minister. And now he fired Canada's first female finance minister because she dared question him. That sounds pretty familiar. No strong woman exists in that caucus. Why would any woman defend this man instead of calling for an election?
The Honourable Leader of the Government in the House of Commons.
You know, Mr. Speaker, I have a lot of respect for that member opposite, but I think she's speaking from her own experience with the Leader of the official opposition when she said that she wasn't going to support him and then spent a year in the hinterlands, Mr. Speaker. But what I will say is that when it comes to actually doing things that support women, we have done that on this side of the House. Whether it's affordable childcare that is making it possible for hundreds of thousands of women to join the workforce, making contraceptions free, or the Canada Child Benefit that is helping families pay the bills. And what do Conservative members of Parliament do every time? They vote against them. So actions speak louder than words, Mr. Speaker.
The Honourable Member for Wellington Halton Hills.
Mr. Speaker, this Prime Minister has lost control. He's lost control of the economy. He's lost control of immigration. He's lost control of so many files. And now he's lost control of the government. It's long past time for an election. This Prime Minister has sat too long here for any good that he has been doing. In the name of God, will he go to Rideau Hall, call an election, and end the chaos?
The Honourable Member for Calgary Forest Lawn.
This week, Prime Minister has lost control. Carbon tax Carney wrote the fiscal update, filled it with poison pills, so he could blame the Finance Minister while pushing her off the fiscal cliff, so he can take her job and eventually the Prime Minister's job. The Finance Minister figured out the plan, so she resigned in protest. She said she no longer has confidence in this weak Prime Minister and carbon tax Carney's plan. If the Prime Minister's own caucus and cabinet don't have confidence in him, even though the leader of the NDP does, why should Canadians?
The Honourable Minister for Housing, Infrastructure and Communities.
Mr. Speaker, in a moment where Canadians are looking for leadership, the Conservative asking the question can only come up with names to lobby towards his political opponents.
Colleagues, it is very important for us to just hear the question and hear the answer. The Honourable Minister, from the start.
From the top.
Mr. Speaker, the very best that the Conservatives can offer to this conversation is name-calling, mudslinging, not solutions to the problems that Canadians are facing. When I talk to people at home, they want their governments to be focusing on creating good jobs to make sure people can afford to put food on the table. They want to make sure that governments are advancing policies to invest in healthcare and housing. They want to make sure we're doing more to protect the environment. Every time we put policies on the table to accomplish these ends, the Conservatives throw their hands up in the air, vote against, and just sling mud towards their opponents. That is not what people in my community want. It is not what Canadians deserve. We're going to advance solutions that introduce real and meaningful changes that will benefit people who live in this country.
I'm going to ask the Honourable Member from Dufferin-Caledon, please, to hold off on making comments while the other people have the floor. The Honourable Member from Calgary Forest Lawn.
He's right. After 9 years of that incompetent minister and the Prime Minister, Canadians are looking for leadership. Carbon tax Carney's Canadian comeback fueled a fiscal feud for the former Finance Minister. Carney wrote the fiscal update, pushed insane inflationary spending, and brought in the 2-month tax trick while trying to blame the Finance Minister for taking Canada's finances off a cliff. Will he stop passing the blame on to women in his caucus and call a carbon tax election now so common sense Conservatives can give the power back to Canadians?
The Honourable Minister for Housing, Infrastructure and Communities.
Mr. Speaker, I was wrong before when I said all they had was name calling. Apparently they have alliteration as well. But Mr. Speaker, that is not going to put food on the table for people who need it in my community or his. It is not going to put a roof over the head of people who are vulnerable in this country. Mr. Speaker, if he wants to make this argument about whether women will be supported, I wonder if he has ever approached the leader of the Conservative Party about using hashtags to specifically attract the attention of men who hate women to support him online. I wonder if he's asked questions about why he's cancelled the investigation as to who was behind it, or perhaps it's because he knows it was the Conservative leader himself.
The honourable member for Leeds, Grenville, Thousand Islands and Rideau Lakes.
After 9 years of this NDP Liberal government, everything is out of control. Home prices have doubled. Food bank use is seeing 2 million users in a single month. And the real fiscal advisor to this Prime Minister wrote the financial update for this afternoon. It included a temporary 2-month tax trick and is set to smash through the massive $40 billion deficit promise that was made by the Finance Minister. And when they tried to blame the economic vandalism on her, she quit, saying that she doesn't have confidence in this Prime Minister. Now, they can't tell us how much they've spent. They can't tell us who's in charge. How can anyone have confidence in this Prime Minister?
The Honourable Minister for Housing, Infrastructure and Communities.
Mr. Speaker, the Conservatives seem to know the cost of everything but the value of nothing. They do not see value in investing in childcare, which has not only reduced costs for families, but led to the largest increase in women's participation in the labour force in the history of this country. They don't seem to believe there is value in investing in social housing, in public housing, in affordable housing, so everyone in this country can have a roof over their head. They don't believe in the value of the Canada Child Benefit, which is ensuring middle-class families in this country can put food on the table. So before he continues to sling mud and arrows on this side of the House, he perhaps should look inward and ask why he is not even allowed to advocate on behalf of his community, because his leader has said that's just not in order.
The honourable member for Leeds, Grenville, Thousand Islands and Rideau Lakes.
Yeah, we talk about having confidence. This is coming from a minister who said just today that he's not going to continue to serve in the cabinet of that Prime Minister. Just like the Finance Minister who said she doesn't have confidence, or the 7 other ministers over there, or the 1 in 5 Liberal MPs who said they don't have confidence in this NDP Liberal Prime Minister who broke housing, who broke immigration, who broke our finances in this country. These Liberals talk about costs, but they have absolutely no idea how much they've spent. No government has ever spent so much to achieve as little as this government has. We know why the NDP leader has confidence in this Prime Minister. It's for his pension. But why should Canadians?
The Honourable Minister for Housing, Infrastructure and Communities.
Mr. Speaker, my honourable colleague is right about one thing. I did announce this morning that I'm not going to be seeking re-election. But I can tell you, if he thinks that's a matter of confidence, I can tell him it's that I have confidence I am going to be the best father to my kids that I could possibly be over the rest of my life. And that is what is most important to me. But Mr. Speaker, while I have the floor, I should say thank you for the opportunity to engage in the tete-a-tete over the years. This may be one of the last opportunities that I have, and I want to use it to make this point. Canadians want governments to invest to increase the quality of life that they get to enjoy. We seem not to be able to agree on that basic tenet. On this side of the House, we will put measures in place to support families, not advocate for cuts.
The honourable member for Regina Capel.
Carbon tax Carney is the Prime Minister's official economic advisor, and his plan was always to push out the Finance Minister and take her place. Let's look at his advice so far. He forced her to bring in the GST tax trick. Carney also forced through insane inflationary spending, smashing through that $40 billion guardrail. Carney's economic plan is so bad, the Finance Minister resigned in protest rather than humiliate herself into reading his homework. Now, nobody knows who the Finance Minister is. Mr. Speaker, enough is enough. Why won't the Prime Minister do the only honourable thing left and let Canadians decide for themselves in a carbon tax election?
The Honourable Leader of the Government in the House of Commons.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. Another day, another attack against Canadians from the Conservative Party of Canada. Anytime someone steps up who disagrees with their vision for Canada, what do? Personal attacks, Mr. Speaker. Mr. Speaker, Canadians deserve better than the slogans and personal attacks that we get from Conservative members of Parliament. Thank you, Mr. Speaker.
The honourable member for Regina Capel.
The attacks on this government's economic record are coming from inside the Liberals' own cabinet, Mr. Speaker. And it looks more and more like Carbon Tax Carney's plan to push out the Prime Minister is working as well, too. For Carbon Tax Carney, it's always been profits over people. Look at his record. Since he became the top economic advisor to the PM, he's moved his own company's headquarters to New York City. He got caught unethically lobbying the UK government. And his firm Brookfield is now looking for $10 billion in taxpayers' money for a new investment fund, which would be managed by Brookfield, his own company. Mr. Speaker, Canadians deserve better than this government in shambles. Why not call a carbon tax election and let Canadians decide for themselves?
The honourable leader of the government in the House of Commons.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. Mr. Speaker, this is the People's House, and in it we should be debating things that are pertinent to the administration of government. But what we hear from the House Leader from the Conservative Party of Canada is attacks on Canadians, Mr. Speaker. The person he is talking about is not a sitting member of Parliament, is not a cabinet minister. It is someone that they are attacking simply because they do not share their vision of Canada. Mr. Speaker, every single Canadian deserves better than what we hear from the opposition today. Thank you, Mr. Speaker.
The honourable member for Stormont Dundas, South Glengarry.
The Prime Minister's lost control. Hours before delivering a fiscal update, the Finance Minister resigned, joining 1/5 of the Liberal caucus and saying she doesn't have confidence in the Prime Minister either. And there's only one person left keeping this Prime Minister in power, and that's the leader of the NDP. The fall budget is scheduled to be tabled in 54 minutes, and we don't even know who the Finance Minister is. The Liberals' own cabinet order on succession states if it's not her, it's the Industry Minister, but he says he doesn't want to. So that means it's supposed to go to the disgraced member from Edmonton Centre. The question is, will the other Randy be Canada's next Finance Minister? And how much is he investing in fraud?
Again, I've asked members to please not do indirectly what they can't do directly by referring to a member by their first name. The Honourable Leader... Order! The Honourable Leader of the Government in the House of Commons.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. Again, all we see from Conservative members of Parliament is personal attacks and mudslinging against Canadians. Mr. Speaker, what we all need to be doing right now is standing united for our country, making sure that we are protecting the Canadian economy, Canadian jobs, and making things a little bit easier for Canadians. We look forward to presenting the fall economic statement later this afternoon. Thank you.